We are diving deep today into, well, one of the most powerful and I think fundamentally challenging ideas in modern social philosophy.
We are.
We're looking at Martha C. Nussbaum's vision of the human development approach, mostly from her book, Creating Capabilities.
And this is a deep dive that really, it asks you to totally recalibrate how we measure human progress. I mean, for decades, the
Yeah.
main metric used by these huge global institutions.
The IMF, the World Bank.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Them and, countless national governments. They all told what Nussbaum calls a fundamentally distorted story of what it means for a country to, get better.
And that distorted story really came down to one single kind of crude measure that just reigned supreme, didn't it?
It did. Gross domestic product, GDP.
Usually per capita. And the narrative was so simple. If GDP is going up, your country is doing well. End of story.
Right.
It was the baseline for success for way too long.
Yep.
But how did such a crude number manage to dominate the whole conversation for so long? I mean, its flaws seem pretty obvious now.
Well, it was simple, it was measurable, and it was highly aggregated. So it served the interests of economists who, they just wanted to prioritize market activity.
Right.
But that simplicity, that's where the flaw is.
Right.
GDP gave top marks to countries that were, just beneath the surface, completely collapsing under the weight of massive inequality. It measures wealth, sure, but it completely fails to account for how that wealth is shared.
Or if it even translates into basic well-being for actual people.
Exactly.
So it encourages growth, but doesn't really care about the living standard of the most marginalized people. You can have foreign investment skyrocketing, a high GDP per capita, and we're going to look at a perfect example of this in India, but still have catastrophic problems with health, with education, with political freedom for most of your population.
And the old model just saw those social problems as something that economic growth would sort of eventually solve, almost like an afterthought.
A trickle-down effect for human rights.
Pretty much. The dominant thinking was that development agencies should just work for economic expansion and assume that things like health, education, security, all that would just naturally follow. But as the sources we're looking at show, crucial things like literacy or infant mortality or women's empowerment, they don't just improve because the national economy gets bigger. You need active policy. You need to actually intervene.
So enter the counter theory. There's this powerful paradigm shift happening now, known as the human development approach, or maybe more commonly, the capabilities approach.
And it's gaining serious and, I would say, very necessary influence. You see it formalized in things like the UN Human Development Reports.
Which have been coming out every year since 1990.
Right. And it's championed by these huge intellectual figures like Amartya Sen and, of course, Martha Nussbaum.
And the capabilities approach, it just reorients the whole discussion. It moves away from inputs like money and toward outcomes, toward freedom.
Instead of asking, how much money is this country making, it starts with a really simple but profoundly challenging question, which is, what are people actually able to do and be? What real substantive freedoms or opportunities are actually available to them to live lives worthy of human dignity?
And that distinction, what you are able to do versus what resources you just happen to have, that's where this whole theory just lives and breathes.
It is.
So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack this whole paradigm shift, look at its philosophical roots, and crucially, we're going to spend some serious time on the specific list of central capabilities that Nussbaum proposes as the foundation for a just society.
We want to give you the intellectual toolkit to look at policies based on human well-being, not just balance sheets.
Exactly. So if the traditional model, GDP and all that, relies on these cold aggregated numbers, capabilities approach finds its moral force, its real power in individual human stories. And Nussbaum, she anchors her whole argument with one anecdote that truly defines the problem. The life of a woman named Vasanti.
Right. Vasanti was a woman in her early 30s living in Ahmedabad, which is this huge city in the state of Gujarat in India. And her life story is just a devastating illustration of how those traditional metrics completely miss the boat on human suffering.
On dependency, on what it really means to lack freedom.
Exactly.
And her struggles were just relentless. They define the kind of vulnerability that a statistic like GDP per capita just erases.
So her husband was a gambler and an alcoholic. He would routinely take any money they had for the household and spend it on drink, leaving her with nothing.
And when the money ran out, he beat her.
On top of that, she had no education. And because of this big national push in India decades earlier, she'd been forced into sterilization.
A population control measure.
Yes, but for her, It removed her ability to have children, which in that context also denied her a potential source of social and economic security that children can sometimes provide. So she was completely vulnerable and totally dependent.
And because of the violence, she tried to leave him, but she was trapped, economically trapped.
Her own family, her parents, her siblings, they were only willing to take her back on one condition.
That she would be completely dependent on them, total submission, no hope for her own life.
It was no escape at all, so she had very few alternatives. At one point, she was even forced into sex work just to get by.
A desperate measure that just made her even more marginalized.
It did. Eventually, though, she managed to find a slightly safer, but still incredibly precarious way to make a living. She was using old sewing machine parts to make these tiny eye holes for hooks on saris.
Just earning a tiny income, barely enough to survive on her own and escape the immediate violence.
Right. And this is the moment where an external intervention becomes completely transformational for her. The help came from the Self-Employed Women's Organization, or SIWA.
An internationally famous activist group founded by the incredible Ela Bhatt.
So SIWA offered Vasanti a small loan. Now, a traditional economist looking at this would just see a tiny financial transaction, a slight uptick in her income.
A blip on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. But for Vasanti, this was so much more than money. This loan was the tool that allowed her to secure genuine economic independence.
It let her leave her husband for good.
Right. It let her pay back her brothers and formally break that cycle of dependency and submission that had held her captive for her entire life.
And the philosophical point here is so clear. Her transformation wasn't about the cash. It was about securing what Nussbaum calls substantial freedoms. It was the freedom to leave, which restored her bodily integrity. It allowed her to participate in local politics. That's a vital piece of control over one's environment.
And so importantly, it let her have dignified friendships, like the one she developed with a woman named Kokila, who used to be a client. But now they were friends, equals.
And that secured her affiliation and, the social basis of self-respect.
And the standard development approach, the one focused on GDP, would ignore almost every single important element of Vasanti's story. GDP can't measure freedom from domestic violence.
It can't measure literacy.
It certainly can't measure your ability to participate in political choices or enjoy friendships. It just measures wealth, not the distribution of opportunities that you need for a life with dignity.
Which brings us back to Gujarat, the state where Vasanti lived. Our sources point out that Gujarat is often held up as this huge Indian economic success story. High GDP per capita, lots of foreign investment.
Right.
But it actually has a terrible record when it comes to translating that wealth into real improvements in education, health, and opportunities for people like Vasanti. The wealth is concentrated. It just isn't generating the capabilities people need.
And you see this failure so sharply when you look at gender. You can contrast Gujarat with a state like Kerala.
Okay.
Kerala has a healthy sex ratio, about 102 women to 100 men, and very high female literacy. But other states, like Bihar or parts of Gujarat, have these deeply skewed ratios, sometimes as low as 75 women to 100 men.
Which signals profound gender neglect, higher female mortality.
Yes, and nationally, the literacy gap is staggering. The literacy rate for women in India is way lower than for men, something like 63% versus 81%.
And that's not just a gap in reading. That's a gap in life expectancy, in health, in political awareness. It's a systemic barrier to justice.
And that inequality isn't just cultural. It gets reinforced by legal and economic structures, which the capabilities approach directly targets, things like unequal property and inheritance laws.
Even when some laws were changed, certain Hindu property laws still gave a daughter less than a son, which just reinforces that financial dependency.
Right.
So let's push on that for a second. Why is property ownership so central to this argument? I mean, isn't the focus supposed to be on things like health and literacy?
It is, but property is crucial because it enables choice and safety. Research shows again and again that land ownership is probably the single most important factor that explains why women in some areas suffer less domestic abuse.
Because they have an exit option.
They have a real, tangible exit option. If she can leave and she has resources that she controls, land, property, credit, she has agency. She has dignity. Without it, like Vasanti before Siwa, she is completely vulnerable. Property is a capability enabler. It's fundamental to control over one's environment and bodily integrity.
So when we look at a place like Gujarat, we realize that the GDP numbers are a total distraction.
They really are.
If the state has poor healthcare, poor education, and no real job opportunities, the overall prosperity is essentially meaningless to millions of its own people. And that failure is hidden because GDP makes us focus on the size of the pie, not who gets a slice.
Or, more importantly, whether they even have the capability to eat it.
Hmm.
So we really need to define the foundational ideas here because this framework can sometimes get confused with just, another economic measure.
It's much more than that.
It is. The capabilities approach is, of course, tied to Amartya Sen, the Nobel laureate who first framed it. But Nussbaum has really refined it into a distinct theory of justice.
And that relationship is important to get clear, isn't it? Sen was focused more on, say, comparative quality of life assessment. How do two countries stack up?
Right. He generally avoided proposing a single, definitive list of capabilities. He wanted to keep it open to local democratic debate. He was focused on the idea of capability.
Whereas Nussbaum's version, which she calls the capabilities approach, serves a different, more prescriptive purpose.
Exactly. It's a normative theory of social justice. It provides a basic political framework and, this is critical, a necessary threshold of specific entitlements.
The 10 capabilities we're going to get to.
Right. Entitlements that have to be guaranteed by political institutions to every citizen, all grounded in this idea of equal human dignity. It wants to establish a firm, minimum floor of justice that no political system can cross.
So if Sen mapped out the playing field, Nussbaum drew the constitutional foul lines.
That's a good way to put it. And to understand those lines, we have to get the key terminology right. This is where the theory really gets its analytic power. We have to differentiate between functionings and capabilities.
Okay, so a functioning it's the actual doing or being. It's the realized state, the observable achievement.
Exactly. For example, I am well-nourished. I am voting in an election. I am safe from violence. Those are functioning.
Got it. And a capability.
A capability is the substantive freedom or the real opportunity to achieve that functioning. It's the ability to be well-nourished, the freedom to participate in politics, the ability to move around without fear.
It's the set of real choices you have.
It is. And the focus on capabilities, on what people are able to do, is what respects individual choice.
Give us the classic example here.
The fasting example. If a person chooses to fast for religious reasons, they might be functioning poorly in terms of nutrition at that moment, but they still have the capability for nourishment. Food is available. Their choice is respected. But if they are starving because of poverty or a famine, the capability for nourishment has been denied. Their lack of functioning isn't a choice. It's imposed by deprivation. The goal isn't to stop people from fasting. It's to make sure everyone has the real freedom and access to nutrition in the first place.
So poverty steals the choice, while a voluntary act like fasting demonstrates that you still have it. The real deprivation is the lack of freedom, not just the physical state itself.
Precisely. And Nussbaum organizes these capabilities into 3 different types, which kind of define a spectrum of human potential.
First up, we have basic capabilities.
These are the innate faculties we're all born with that make later development possible. The capacity for speech, for basic thought, the potential for movement, the ability to feel emotion.
They're foundational.
Yes, and they guarantee a basic entitlement to all humans, just by virtue of being human.
Okay. Second, there are internal capabilities.
Right. These are the developed traits and skills that are inside a person, usually nurtured by family and education. So, literacy, a scientific skill, good health habits, self-confidence.
Vasanti's growth in confidence and her political skills at Siwa would be her developing her internal capabilities.
A perfect example. And finally, and this is the most important one for policy and justice, we have the combined capabilities.
And these are the internal capabilities plus the right external conditions.
Yes. The internal capabilities combined with the necessary social, political, and economic conditions that you need to turn those internal skills into real opportunities for choice and action. These are the substantial freedoms.
So the core message for any government is that you have to guarantee the combined capabilities.
You have to. It's not enough to fund schools to build internal capabilities if the rest of society prevents you from using that education.
That sounds like a colossal waste of human potential. Can you give us an example of that? A state that builds the internal capability but fails on the combined one.
Absolutely. Imagine a modern authoritarian country that invests heavily in its universities.
Yeah.
It produces thousands of highly skilled engineers, computer scientists, politically aware graduates.
So they have high internal capabilities. They're smart. They're skilled.
Exactly. But if that society has no free speech, no freedom of assembly, no real democracy, and if all the good jobs are controlled by corruption or nepotism,
Then those internal skills can't be translated into action.
right, they lack the combined capability for political participation or dignified employment because the external framework, the laws, the social context is missing or it's actively hostile.
So the government has created these capable citizens, but then offers them no way to actually use their capabilities. The state is responsible for creating that external context. That's its job.
That is its fundamental job.
Okay, so if the capabilities approach is the big counter theory to GDP, then the central capabilities list is really the backbone of that theory. It shifts the conversation from these abstract ideas to, well, to concrete, legally defensible entitlements.
This list is Nussbaum's crucial move. She's arguing that the whole idea of human dignity, that humans are worthy of respect just for being human, requires a political system that secures a threshold level of these 10 capabilities for every single citizen.
And this threshold idea is fundamental, isn't it?
It is. These 10 capabilities define a social minimum, a floor, and it has to be secured by political structures, ideally written into a national constitution.
So if a society fails to meet this threshold for anyone, no matter their gender, caste, religion, whatever, that society is failing at basic justice.
It is not meeting its minimum obligations to its members. Full stop.
It sounds idealistic, though. I mean, how can a really poor country actually guarantee the capability of, say, play or other species when people are still lacking basic health care? Is there a hierarchy here?
That's a really important and necessary question, and Nussbaum addresses it head-on. She acknowledges that when you have real scarcity, policymakers have to make incredibly hard choices. But she firmly rejects the idea of a fixed hierarchy, where you say, okay, play has to wait until bodily health is at 100%.
Why?
Because she argues all 10 are distinct and equally essential parts of a fully human life. They all have to be addressed at the same time, even if resources limit the degree to which you can meet them right away. The goal is to get everyone above that minimum threshold across all 10 areas.
Because a lack in one area can undermine the others?
Immediately. If you lack bodily integrity, it instantly undermines your health and your ability to form affiliations. They're all interconnected.
That makes sense. Okay, let's walk through these 10 entitlements, keeping that constitutional dignity-based mandate in mind.
All right. Number 1, life. Seems obvious, but it's defined broadly. Being able to live to the end of a human life of normal length and not dying prematurely or before your life is so reduced, it's not worth living. It's about quality, not just quantity.
2, bodily health. Being able to have good health, and she specifically includes reproductive health, being adequately nourished, and having adequate shelter. This is way beyond just having money. It means the state has to actively ensure the conditions for health are met.
Right. Clean water, sanitation, things like that.
3, bodily integrity. And here we are, right back with the Vasanti story.
We are. It means being able to move freely, being secure against violent assault, including sexual assault and domestic violence, and having choice in matters of reproduction. Protecting this requires active state intervention.
Police, domestic violence laws, shelters. Not just the state promising not to interfere.
Exactly.
4, senses, imagination, and thought. This covers the intellectual and spiritual side of a dignified life. Being able to use your senses to imagine, to think, to reason in a truly human way.
This covers basic literacy, education, science, art, literature, and the guaranteed freedom of religious exercise.
Number 5 is emotions. Being able to have attachments to people and things outside ourselves. To love, to grieve. And crucially, she says, not having your emotional development crushed by fear and anxiety.
This means a political system has to support human trust and association, so people can live without being paralyzed by fear.
6, practical reason. This is foundational to being your own person, being able to form your own idea of a good life and to think critically about how to live it.
And this requires strong, active protection for liberty of conscience, for religious liberty, for political deliberation. It secures your right to choose your own path.
7 is affiliation, and this one is split into 2 parts.
Right. Part A is about being able to live with and toward other people, to show concern, to engage in social interaction, to imagine what it's like to be someone else. So you have to protect things like freedom of assembly and political speech.
And Part B of affiliation?
This is huge. It's having the social basis of self-respect and non-humiliation. Being able to be treated as a dignified being whose worth is equal to that of others.
So this is an explicit, sweeping mandate against systemic discrimination. on the basis of sex, sexual orientation, ethnicity, caste, religion, anything that subjects a person to humiliation.
Anything. Number 8, other species. Being able to live with concern for and in relation to animals, plants, and the natural world, this puts environmental protection right at the heart of human dignity.
9. Play. Simple but profound. Being able to laugh, to play, to enjoy recreation. It's seen as necessary for a fully human life. It shows you're free from the constant anxiety of just surviving.
And finally, number 10, control over one's environment. This is also split in two.
Political and material.
Right, A is political control. Being able to participate effectively in the political choices that govern your life, the right to participate, free speech, free association, the cornerstone of democracy.
And B is material control. Being able to hold property, land, goods on an equal basis with others. The right to seek a job on an equal basis.
Yep.
To work as a human being with dignity and meaningful relationships with other workers.
And that material control, that's what provided the exit option and the stability that Vasanti finally found.
So this list, when you take it all together, it's not just an alternative to GDP, it's a complete architecture for basic social justice.
It is. It touches on political rights, social recognition, bodily security, mental well-being, and it sees all of them as non-negotiable entitlements for a life with dignity.
So to really get the power of the capabilities approach, we need to spend some real time on why it stands as such a necessary counter-theory. We need to critique the other paradigms it wants to replace.
We have to go beyond just saying GDP is bad. We need to get into why the philosophical underpinnings of traditional economics just aren't good enough for human justice.
Okay, so critique number 1 is against resource-based approaches. This includes GDP, income, but also, critically, John Rawls's theory of distributing primary goods.
Right. Primary goods are things like income, wealth, basic liberties. The resources anyone would need for a rational life plan.
And Rawls's theory of justice is, it's monumental in philosophy. So why does Nussbaum argue that focusing on these resources, even when they're chosen behind that famous veil of ignorance, ultimately fails?
Because of what she calls the resource trap. Resources are just inputs. They're not achievements.
Yeah.
And the whole thing hinges on the heterogeneity problem.
The what problem?
The heterogeneity problem. It's the simple fact that if you only focus on giving everyone the same amount of income or resources, you ignore the vast differences between people.
So equal resources don't translate into equal capability.
Not at all.
Okay, give us a detailed scenario of how that works in practice.
Sure. Imagine 3 citizens, A, B, and C. They each get the exact same government check, the same pile of primary goods.
Okay.
Citizen A is a healthy adult male. Citizen B is a pregnant woman. Citizen C is an adult with a severe physical disability.
Right, I see where this is going.
To achieve the simple functioning of being well-nourished, Citizen B, the pregnant woman, needs way more calories and specific nutrients than A or C. And to achieve the capability of mobility, Citizen C needs massive extra resources, ramps, accessible transport, maybe a full-time assistant, that A and B don't need at all.
So giving everyone the same pile of money actually guarantees capability inequality because the cost of turning that money into a good life is dramatically higher for some people.
Precisely. If we ignore this heterogeneity, we are structurally marginalizing the people who start with disadvantages. Giving Citizen C the same income as everyone else without addressing their specific, costly needs is a failure of justice. Primary goods are essential, but they are a terrible proxy for real-world capabilities.
And on top of that, wealth is a poor proxy for all the non-market goods, isn't it? Things like religious freedom or protection from persecution or clean air.
Absolutely. You could be a millionaire from a persecuted minority group. Your wealth offers you zero guarantee of your affiliation, that social basis of self-respect, or your bodily integrity. A resource-based approach completely misses these non-economic injustices.
Right. The second major critique takes aim at a philosophical giant, utilitarianism.
The idea of measuring the quality of a society based on its utility or satisfaction, the sum total of pleasure or happiness.
It sounds appealing. We want to maximize happiness, but Nussbaum says it's fundamentally flawed.
It is, because of what she calls the satisfaction trap. The main problem is adaptive preferences.
What does that mean?
It means that humans are psychologically resilient. People often adjust their expectations and their desires downward to fit their deprived reality. If you're denied opportunities for your whole life, you might just stop wanting what you're missing. You learn to be happy with your deprivation.
So why is that a failure of justice? I mean, if people say they're satisfied, haven't we succeeded?
Because that satisfaction is deformed. It's not a sign of flourishing. It's a sign of psychological adjustment to oppression. The classic case Sen studied was of poor women and widows in Bengal who were severely deprived, had terrible objective health, but reported that their health was good.
Because they had no idea what it felt like to actually be healthy.
They didn't. Their preferences had adapted to their meager circumstances. So if your theory of justice is based on subjective satisfaction, you're basically justifying leaving these people in their deprived state because they report being happy, or at least resigned to it.
It completely fails the test of human dignity. It accepts a diminished version of humanity.
And that leads to the deeper failure of utilitarianism. It doesn't protect individual rights. The core goal is to maximize total utility for the majority. And in its raw form, that can justify sacrificing the rights of a minority if it creates a bigger gain for the whole.
Like justifying labor exploitation or social oppression as long as the pain of the few is outweighed by the pleasure of the many.
Precisely. Utilitarianism has no internal brake to protect a minimal threshold of dignity. The capabilities approach, on the other hand, sees the 10 central capabilities as pre-political moral entitlements.
They can't be traded away for the greater good?
Never. They are a constitutional floor that the state must uphold, no matter what the majority wants. The goal is action and opportunity. The capabilities, because satisfaction is flimsy. It can be manipulated. But the ability to function is an objective measure of justice.
And finally, let's circle back to Rawls and the social contract theories. The CIA is often seen as trying to strengthen Rawls's project.
It is. Rawls's thought experiment, The Veil of Ignorance, is brilliant. But again, his reliance on primary goods runs right into that heterogeneity problem we just talked about.
If people have different needs, giving them equal resources just doesn't get them to an equal starting line for a good life.
And the CA sees that as a moral oversight that has to be corrected. This is why it's framed as a piece of political liberalism. It's aiming for an overlapping consensus. It means the central capabilities list provides the fundamental political principles that everyone can agree on, no matter their religion, their philosophy, their personal beliefs, because they respect equal human dignity and liberty.
So the capabilities approach, it takes the philosophical strength of Rawls, but it fixes the weakness of focusing on resources. It makes it a stronger, more realistic, and more humane theory of justice.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get practical. Let's talk about the implications of actually implementing a capabilities framework. This is where the rubber meets the road.
It is. This isn't just an abstract exercise. The CA proposes that delivering these 10 capabilities to all citizens at a basic threshold level is the essential job of a nation's political structure.
So the focus isn't on perfect equality of outcome for everyone and everything.
No.
It's about a universal floor of opportunity. The approach demands equal entitlement to that threshold of capability. Everyone has to meet this minimum standard needed for a life with dignity. What happens above that floor is a different conversation, but it absolutely insists on the floor itself.
And that clarity is so important when resources are scarce. Poor societies, or those dealing with emergencies, face what are called tragic choices.
Triage.
Right. And the CA insists that even in a tragedy, the priority has to be maintaining that capability threshold for the greatest number of people. You can't just let some citizens fall completely below the minimum.
You focus on securing the basics, life, bodily health, integrity for as many as possible, because failing to secure that threshold is a failure of justice.
It is. So the capabilities list is designed to play a huge constitutional and political role. These are supposed to be fundamental entitlements grounded in human dignity, which governments must actively work to secure.
And this list is meant to be used in, say, judicial review or when writing laws. It helps frame constitutional protections. So you can connect something like public education or environmental safety back to the fundamental requirement of human dignity.
It gives you a non-economic reason for state action. And this forces us to confront the difference between negative and positive liberty.
Which is a massive policy shift away from classical liberal government.
It's huge. Classical liberalism traditionally focuses on negative liberty, freedom from interference.
Freedom from assault, freedom of speech.
Yeah.
The state's job is just not to get in your way.
Right. And the CA embraces that, but says it's nowhere near enough. It also mandates positive liberty, the opportunity or the resources to do or to be something.
The ability to get a job, the ability to read, the ability to be well-nourished.
All of it.
And that is a huge shift in the responsibility of the state. It goes from being a referee to being an active provider, an enabler.
It does.
So what are the practical implications of demanding positive liberty, especially in an area like bodily integrity?
It means the state's responsibility goes into areas that were once considered private. Take protecting the capability of bodily integrity for women. The state can't just refrain from assaulting them, that's negative liberty. It also has to actively protect them from violence inside the home.
Which is a sphere many classical liberals would say is too private for the state to get involved in.
Exactly. But this requires a significant administrative infrastructure, doesn't it?
Shelters, police training, legal aid, social workers. It's costly.
It is. It requires the state not just to not make them unfree, but to actively create the conditions, laws, policing, economic stability, emergency shelters, to make them free to live without fear. As Vasanti's story showed, her freedom from violence didn't just depend on her husband not hitting her.
It depended on Siwa's positive intervention, the loan.
Exactly. The CA acknowledges the high cost, but basically says these are the necessary costs of a just society that actually honors human dignity.
So finally, there are two specific concepts that help us understand how these deprivations can snowball and how a targeted intervention can transform a life across multiple areas at once.
Fertile functioning or capability formation, and its opposite, corrosive disadvantage.
Let's start with the positive one. A fertile capability is one that unlocks or supports a bunch of others.
It creates a cascade of improvement. For Vasanti, access to credit, a material capability, was incredibly fertile. It supported her bodily integrity because she could leave her husband.
Her affiliation because she could build real friendships.
And her political participation. That one capability, credit, was fertile because it removed the biggest, most immediate constraint on her life, which let her realize so many other functionings.
And the flip side is corrosive disadvantage.
This is a deprivation that systematically makes it harder to achieve all the other capabilities. For Vasanti, the lack of protection for her bodily integrity and her total dependence on her husband, that was a corrosive disadvantage.
It didn't just block one thing.
No, it jeopardized her health, it undermined her emotional well-being, it stopped her from getting a job, it silenced her political voice. A corrosive disadvantage doesn't just block one capability, it undermines a person's entire life across the whole spectrum of what it means to flourish.
So the power of this approach isn't just in listing what people lack. It's in identifying the fertile areas for investment, the specific capabilities that, if you can secure them, will lift a person above that minimum threshold and stop one single deprivation from corrupting their entire existence.
It's a targeted systemic approach to justice.
So to summarize this whole immense shift in thinking,
The capabilities approach moves the focus completely. It moves away from aggregate wealth and subjective satisfaction, the failures of GDP and utilitarianism, and toward the objective demands of individual dignity.
and toward the specific, substantial freedoms that every single person needs to live a truly human life.
It provides a clear, actionable benchmark for policy choices, for constitutional design. It insists on that constitutional floor.
And it stresses that securing these basic entitlements, health, education, protection from violence, control over your own property, that's the essential job of a nation's political structure.
Exactly. Progress isn't measured by national averages. It's measured by what real people are actually able to do and be. The CA makes it clear that if people aren't being given a life worthy of human dignity, it's not unreasonable to think they would strive for a future where the claims of all these capabilities are fulfilled.
It demands that we look past national wealth to the distribution of real opportunity within a nation. And that leads us to the final thought we want to leave with you. We've seen how domestic violence and a lack of education can become these corrosive disadvantages that restrict a person's entire life, even in a place with a booming economy.
Right.
So think about this. How might applying the lens of the central capabilities, especially affiliation, Part B, that idea of self-respect and non-humiliation and control over one's environment, both political and material, how might that change the way we measure and address chronic social problems in our own communities?
It's a powerful question. It forces you to ask. If we measured local success not by average income, but by whether every single resident is secure from humiliation and has the real ability to find dignified work and participate politically, what new priorities would emerge? Where's the capability floor being breached in our own societies, where wealth might be high, but certain fundamental freedoms remain so unequally distributed?
That is the work that capabilities approach demands of us.